But then I invite you to flip the camera on yourself and apply it to your life. What areas in your life deserve for you to fight for them?
We are back with Melina's final part 3 interview. If you missed part 1 or 2, you can watch those before this one if you want.
All right, so going on to fan questions, Melina, you have one, and let me tell you, it's a long one. So this will be
It
on the
is.
screen. This will be on the screen for those who want to read it with me. It says, I am an activist from Australia who successfully targets medical authorities and medical practitioners located in America who either promote or facilitate the circumcision procedure. Most recently, last week, I have promoted an investigation by regulatory enforcement against the State University of New York for misleading potentially thousands of medical students into following and promoting expired AAP guidance that insists the benefits of infant male circumcision outweighs the risks. A conservative estimate suggests these students went on to perform well over 50,000 circumcision procedures during the 8 years the material was expired. That material has been removed pending investigation. My question is, why is it that regardless of being on the other side of the planet, I can achieve these types of outcomes, noting this is only the most recent example, yet I cannot find one single American that can evidence the same level of efficacy.
Okay, I had to read that a couple of times because this is an intelligent gentleman, I can tell. And first, I want to say amazing. I love the work that you do. That's incredible stuff there. That should definitely be noted first about that. You are an amazing one. You stand out. There are none others like you. I think that's you clearly stated you recognize that also, and I see it. I bet a lot of people do. And then I also love how your follow-up question mentioned that you said this question is not just for Melina, it's for everyone. And it really just got me thinking. So each of us personally, like, what is our own level of intactivism? And do we feel like that is doing enough? And how do we really rate for ourselves whether or not, we think something is enough? Because ultimately, here's how I understood that question. Incredible results have been produced due to highly effective intactivist measures taken. And when that is the example we have of what is possible, how come we're not seeing those same kind of results coming out of the intactivist community in America, where I know it's an issue in Australia as well, but I mean, we're kind of leading the world on this being like an issue still. Ultimately, why are Americans not creating as good of results as we've got coming out of Australia? And so I've really been thinking about that. I appreciate getting that question last night, by the way, because it was nice to actually think about it. I read the question with my family, some of my older kids, and we had a discussion about it. And I'll tell you what I thought kind of, and then I'll tell you what they thought, and we'll just kind of combine it. So my first thought was, well, I don't know if very many Americans, be it intactivists or not, but we'll go with intactivists, but you could generalize it on other topics and say all Americans. I don't know how many of them are necessarily aware of what would be considered very effective intactivism, what actions and measures they can really do, and what power they fully have in their hands to make a difference. And I think that so basically I could summarize that in lack of knowledge, or rather just lack of awareness about what's possible. Because, for example, when I read that, I was like, damn, that's impressive as hell. And that's incredible. And like, my first thought was, wow, I want to have an impact like that. Like, I want to know that what I'm doing is actually churning some numbers and making some big impact. Not downplaying the kids that I've helped. Every single case has been 100% worth the effort, and I'm glad I did it. But to imagine having that kind of outcome, I mean, those numbers he said were really astonishing. So, why is that not happening more here? Is the question. And generalizing a little bit more, why aren't Americans going for things? Why aren't they standing up and having a voice? Why aren't they going after their dreams? Why aren't they pursuing? I think that number one, people don't have the information because it was kept from them. We were not really taught to be an empowered society. They wanted worker bees. And because of that, they don't want free thinkers, so they didn't teach us to be free thinkers. They don't want us to be ambitious and driven, so they didn't teach us to be ambitious and driven. That's the one thing. But credit will go towards my daughter's comment when I bring that up in a second. But honestly, people get emotional, they see something, they feel angry, and they think that by just simply talking about it and being angry and sharing that opinion that they're making a difference. And that's, though we appreciate the energy that goes into that and the heart that goes into that, it's not going to get the numbers like CLR is getting. So why? And I'm just going to segue to what my 21-year-old was saying and her girlfriend. She said propaganda and brainwashing. And I was like, oh. And then kind of to what I was saying, we were really conditioned, a lot of social conditioning to not step out of line, to not be different, to just do the very best job you can at what you do on your job, but stay in your lane. And I think that Americans, as kind of like for generations, have been programmed to just be worker bees and to just get in line and follow the rules. And so it hasn't been the mindset for people to say, wait a minute, what else could I really, really do that would really, really make a difference that might actually take some time out of my day or my week? And it might actually, I might need to give something up in order to make this happen. What else can I really do? And then they're like, and now that I understand this, it is my obligation. I shall do it. And that takes a special kind of person, my friend. So number one, I commend you for that. There need to be more people like that. And so I'm really glad for your question because it really asks us all to look at our lives, at our days, at our hours spent. Because if we want to say, oh, there's no way I could do that, I just don't have the time. But usually that's a lie because usually we can identify when we do some inventory of our time, there's usually some wiggle room that could be spent more efficiently. So why not then? I think that it's a mindset that has not been developed here. And it's awareness that hasn't been developed or encouraged here. Everyone is so programmed to go to work, put the music in, numb out, don't think at all, automatic routine, go home. Oh my God, I don't even want to think about the fact that I just worked the entire fucking day and that I've only got 3 hours before bed. So we're programmed to put on the Netflix. We're programmed to play the games on our phone. We're programmed to distract ourselves until it's time to go to bed and do it all again. Where in there are people making plans to email their representatives or actually contact the hospital and ask some tough questions or print some pamphlets and take them to yada, yada, yada. I think the reason you're not seeing that coming out of America is because America's conscience, or it's not our conscience, is it just our will that's been broken? I think that cowboy spirit's gone. I think everybody's just tired. And I think everybody just needs to get freaking inspired again. I don't know how to do that for you. I think if we stop and think about what matters to us and we get really clear about our personal values and then be really, really honest with ourselves about whether or not we get up and go to bed and actually live an existence that matters. Sure, if you have a family and you're loving on your kids and you're being a good person and you're raising them and you're contributing to society, I am not on that side of the useless eater argument. I think you're valuable, you're worthy, you have the right to live, you have the right to be, and I just want you to be happy and healthy. But are you doing something that makes you feel like you can go to bed with a smile on your face that you've made the world a little bit better place? And if there's a little bit of wiggle room there where you could maybe do that more, I highly recommend that you do, you guys, because I'm telling this to my kids all the time. When you look back on your childhood, you're going to remember a movie. You're not going to necessarily remember how many times you watched it, and you're not going to realize that maybe it was 20 times or something back in the 80s, right? And 80s into 90s. And you remember the memories of the movie, but maybe you watched it that many times. How many hours of your childhood was that you don't have any actual memories of being a kid? I don't know. That's where it gets me, where I'm like, you guys aren't going to remember these shows that you watched. You want to like be making real memories right now. But that's not what people are doing. They're coming home, they're going numb, they don't want to think about how meaningless their lives were. So an inner dialogue about, wow, that this feeling of this can't be it. This can't be everything. This can't be all. You know, you have to think about that and it's uncomfortable, but you have to go through that to realize I actually do want to make a bigger impact. I actually do want to care more. I actually do want my kids to see me trying and doing and being. And until you want that, you will not make changes. So my advice is allow yourself to sit in the discomfort of your dissatisfaction of life long enough to admit that if you made some changes, you could potentially be a happier person. Because how much you enjoy being a parent is how good a childhood your kid's going to have. I heard that the other day. I'm going to stop complaining about how hard it is to be a mom. I don't want them to ever hear that anymore. You know what I mean? I'm like, you guys, we're building the next world because they're watching us. So CLR, people don't have any dreams anymore over here. And so they are not thinking about planning, taking action, staying committed, driven. What you do is what most Americans don't believe they could do. And it would be a lot harder for us than for you because we've been conditioned and programmed with a different mentality. But we're smart. And so many of us are waking up now that it's only a matter of time. And more of us are standing up and saying, hey, you know what? I can probably not save the world, but I also know no one's coming to save me. And so I'm going to do my part for me and my own. And beyond that, we're going to do what we can. And then to be really vulnerable and answer your question on a personal level, I'm not doing more because I'm at max capacity. But at the same time, I want you to know that merely accepting this invitation to come and do this podcast was stepping into the unknown, was stepping into all of my fears. And I've had to be levels of vulnerability that I couldn't have known until I did it. So I bring that up only for the same reason that you brought up all the amazing things that you've done. Guys, you might have a super duper full schedule. Maybe you're like me and you've got 6 kids and a grandson and you're trying to be an entrepreneur and you're building multiple careers at once and learning how to establish yourself as a content creator. And that's a lot. But maybe there's just a little bit more that you can do. If there's something that you care about, find a little bit of a way that you can actually dig into it tangibly so that at the end of the day, you can feel like you moved the needle forward. Because you guys, he's calling us out and he's not wrong. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean that every single one of us is obligated to go out at the same level, but it is an invitation to each one of us to ask ourselves whether or not we are at the level that we personally believe we should be. I've written a book, but I literally took it off Amazon because I wanted to do one more revision of it, and I haven't gotten that completed yet. So, full disclosure, I've got work to do. I've got to get my book back out there. There's no point that I wrote it for the parents that need it if it's not even going to be out there. So that's going to be my tangible action. I'm going to get that back out there. I'm going to start promoting it, and I'm going to give away copies to anybody who needs one who can't afford to buy it. But it's so cheap, you guys. It's just meant to be stupid easy, stupid easy. So I want to encourage everybody to also ask themselves what they're doing and whether or not they feel like they're doing enough and whether or not they just have the bar raised high enough on themselves. Because pertaining to this particular situation and question and topic, but then I invite you to flip the camera on yourself and apply it to your life. What areas in your life deserve for you to fight for them? And what things in your life are consuming the passion that you would need to otherwise fuel that more meaningful activity? And you guys, we all have so much more potential than we're living out right now. So if nothing else, if you just pick something to play out a little bit harder and to lean in a little bit more, let your kids see you alive at the end of the day. Please. Let your kids see you living the life now that you just worked all day for. Look, I got a 13-year-old that's been getting depressed because he's like, damn, he's in junior high now. He's like, if being an adult gets harder than this, he's like, what's it all for? And I'm like, damn, I need to work even harder so that my kid sees me living a life that I love, so that there's a reason for him to keep going and get to the point where he's created a life that he wants for himself. You guys, we all need to do that. It's not our fault that we are where we are. I mean, we didn't know, but it's still our responsibility. And that's what an intactivist is. We didn't know. It wasn't our fault. But now that we know, we choose to do something about it. So the invitation is to look at what you're doing about it and ask yourself if it's enough, or if there's a way you could just tweak or pivot a little bit to just have a little bit more of a reach. And come on, guys. That's what Australia thinks about us. Think we can do better? I think we can do better. What do you think?
Hi, it's Scott, interrupting the interview for a moment to tell you about Potts's e-commerce program. To use it, you get the links from what you want to buy on Amazon or eBay, then you send them to Potts through X or Discord in a direct message or on order ideas on Discord, and Potts will post them in the comments on a YouTube video or in an X post. Then you follow those links that are connected to Potts's Amazon or eBay store, and you buy those items, and Potts will get a percentage of that sale. This funds Potts's expenses to promote the channel and contract with other intactivists. This does not cost you any extra money. All right, thank you, and back to the interview.
All right. Some pushback on your previous comment there is you said that Americans, were programmed to stay in line and to work essentially. But if you look at the intactivist movement, we have the bloodstained men, and they wear very provocative clothing that is not in line to anything American norms. You also have Cockfight. They're a lot newer of a group, and they go out, hold signs, and make a scene. Also, you have Americans that are willing to wear penis costumes, like Eric Klopper. He got a whole bunch of people to go ahead and prance around the universities to promote his show. You also have the midwife Nancy. She wears a penis costume while teaching her midwife class. She just did an interview on ocean birth. And there was even a Jewish intactivist filmmaker. I don't know if she was even an intactivist, to be honest, but she was wearing a penis costume to draw attention. So I would say that a lot of the American intactivist nonprofits, they actually want to go ahead and garner attention. And I feel like CLR, which by the way, he told all the intactivist groups, hey, this is what I'm doing. He's essentially sending emails to high value targets and telling them, hey, you're messing up. Like he doesn't even need to have to bring up circumcision. He just has to say, hey, this is the policy. You're not following the policy. Stop what you're doing immediately, or there's going to be repercussions down the line. I'm going to take this up to a higher power or what have you. And that seems to work versus all the fancy showmanship. So whenever intactivists, they go and they essentially just like they'll do anything for attention, it seems like. They'll even like go ahead and they'll march in pride parades, even though if we're not trying to step out of line, you would think you're not really about LGBT plus. You're talking about circumcision. Like that's like why are you again, you're not staying in line, you're out of line. This is barely parallel to what we're
Right.
doing. So yeah, I guess that's my pushback.
So I'm
What
going
do
to
you think?
totally agree with you and say that I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective. So let me pivot a teeny bit or say kind of the social conditioning is to, as I mentioned, stay in line, do all these different things. But that's not to say that there isn't a significant faction of society that does break free of that. And you're right, many of those intactivists are the groups that already kind of broke free of like just the regular thing. So it begs the question again, especially and not even just like the regular intactives, not regular, but like the everyday ones that are just like moms and dads who took a stance and just do a little bit. But like you're saying, the ones that are out protesting, they're very, very vocal about it. They're very, very active in it, and they're not really going to shy away from stepping out of line. So I guess, those would be the ones that my statement doesn't really apply to. And I think that CLR was specifically talking about like why we're not seeing more of the stronger demonstrations. But also his question was about efficacy or how effective it is.
Effective, yes.
And so maybe just the things that we are doing aren't as effective as, say, going to where the power actually does get turned on or off and submitting some paperwork and making some things get pushed around, like you said, without even bringing up circumcision. Just go right in there and be like, I don't even need to know what your opinion is on it. Look at this legal stuff. So I guess the question is really, is it because we're not aware that we could be more effective than we are? Because I know that, maybe sometimes the idea is first there's the mentality that you just got to stay in line and then you break free of that. And a lot of that whole mentality is like, don't show emotion, don't bother anyone, children should be seen, not heard, type of thing. Guys shouldn't cry. Like, we're not going to acknowledge our feelings a whole lot. And then you break free of that, and all of a sudden everyone has all these emotions they don't know what to do with that they've been suppressing for so long. And that can come out in sometimes like more of emotional ways. And that can look like a dramatic display or somebody getting too emotional and maybe not being so kind over the internet. And maybe it's the same amount of personal emotional energy, but the actions themselves being taken aren't the actions that are going to drive the same kind of outcome. So maybe it's just, let's just really look at what we're doing and whether or not it's even effective, whether or not it's really helping, and then ask ourselves, can I do what I'm doing in a little bit different way to be more effective? Because you're right, there's plenty of people in Utah. We actually have a very diverse, well, actually, I'm talking about Utah because I'm from Utah, but obviously this is more than just Utah. This is everywhere. But like we have a very diverse everything in big, huge LGBTQ community and everything. And you're right. But I think there's a difference between fighting the programming and choosing to be more emotionally expressive. That's not necessarily constructive versus breaking free from the conditioning and just being very collected and specific, and like what CLR was saying, like look at the problem, go right into it, fix the problem, be as efficient as possible. I don't think that's on people's minds. I think people are feel more like that the more emotion that they put into it is the bigger impact it's going to have. But it depends on what the thing is that you're doing. So I think sometimes a lot of that expression that we see is just really getting into the feelings of it more than it is about attacking it from the most tactical and logical methods or whatever in order to get the outcome that you want. So if we're looking at all of it from outcome, what are the outcomes that the bloodstained men are getting? What are the outcomes that the other groups are getting? Is it the kind of outcomes that they feel like are good enough? I guess in Australia, maybe they don't feel like the outcomes we're getting are very sufficient. Do we have numbers that we can show that are suggesting that what we're doing is actually making an impact? So I think it started off with kind of us being encouraged to not really think out of the box. But yeah, there's plenty of people that have also thought outside of the box. But even so, we weren't taught from a young age to seek out solutions and to create a plan and follow through and get it done. Like, and maybe it's not just that I shouldn't just say we as a blanket statement because I've all had different experiences. I'm definitely not assuming to know anyone else's background, but just looking at, the people my age and the stuff that I've seen, there's a lot of some of the same problems. And it's just kind of, we weren't taught to be entrepreneurs. We weren't really taught to be critical thinkers as much. We were taught to be memorizers and repeaters. And yeah, a lot of us broke free of the system and said, I don't agree with that. I'm going to go do my own thing. And that's great and all. And it's wonderful to draw attention to ourselves and to the movement. But the question was really, are the things that we're doing when we're bold enough to seek action, are they efficient enough and are they getting the outcomes that we want?
Okay, so leading question here, but do you think the American nonprofit companies, do you think it's the emotions driving them completely, or do you think some of it has to do with driving donations?
You mean using the emotions to drive the donations?
Yes.
That's a pretty good point, but people make donations when they care about something. So that's just kind of like the natural way of things. So I do see a fuzzy line there where you should be very careful not to be using the truth, which is emotional, to manipulate for financial gain. Because and definitely you should never take advantage of someone else's emotions to like get money from them. So that's a slippery slope I might not be comfortable getting on because like marketing's tricky. I'm just learning it and I'm realizing how much all marketing, all advertisement is literally just a form of psychological manipulation. So probably sure, but how much of that is honest personal emotion? There's plenty of it in the movement. So it's not like that's not there, but how much of it could be for the purpose of driving profits. So that's where it matters that you have ethics and morals and choose to do the right thing because people are giving you their money and you want to make sure that the money's being used for what it should be. But yeah, I don't know. I just be careful with that, guys. Be careful with making your own decisions in an emotional state and be careful guiding someone else to make a decision in an emotional state. Ethically, you should talk with that person without biasing either side, and you should just allow them to get to a calm state where you can communicate again. Because if there's no frontal lobe function going on, they're not hearing logic, they're not clicking on those things, and they're just feeling, and you can manipulate someone's feelings. It is not ethical to do that. So if you're telling a story and there's emotions involved and people are choosing to to contribute, that's just marketing, guys. But it needs to be honest. It needs to be honest. It can't be manipulated. It can't be changed. It can't be anything like that. You can't take the truth and then represent it in a way that changes it a little bit, but for the purpose of people getting more emotional. So careful about that. That's something you should make sure you're respecting the other person by letting their brain do their own thinking, because you can very much lead someone in a conversation and easily get them to change what they believe. But you need to be educating people so that they make their mind up on their own. Because if you don't, then the next person that comes along can just as easily switch their mind back because they didn't personally like make those connections themselves. So do what's right.
Okay. I was thinking about just how interesting it is of the contrast between the American nonprofit system and what circumcision law reform is doing. Because circumcision law reform, it doesn't cost a lot of money. He's self-funded. He told the other intactivist groups all about it, and they weren't interested in hearing it. But meanwhile, almost every popular non-profit intactivist group in America has some grandiose vision or project that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, and there's no evidence backing it up that it's going to work.
Good point.
I just think it's very, I mean, how is that not emotional? You know, how is that not like, oh, hey, let's go ahead and sue a state, but I just need like $400,000 to go ahead and start suing states. You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
that's that's a lot, especially when you have other options that aren't as expensive. And even we could go with like Intact America, where they pulled in millions of dollars before. And what did they do to show for it? You know, especially this year. Do you know what Intact America has done this year?
I full disclosure, I haven't been following the news super well on it, so I'm not super aware.
Okay, that's fine. But like you're an intactivist. Intact America is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and you don't know about it. So that's like, well, what are you doing with the money? I find that very interesting. So that's why I think a lot of intactivists are skeptical about, are they doing things because they want to make a change, or are they just trying to drive donations? And I'm not just talking about Intact America, but we're talking about like like the all the intactivist nonprofit groups, which you have to look at them individually and find out about yourself. And of course, Paz will make some videos as well and do some investigative research. But yeah, that's all what I have though. Any last words from you, Melina, before I end this?
This was awesome. I really had a great time talking to you. I always really enjoy the thoughtful questions that you bring and the discussion that we're able to have. And I always hope that it helps somebody or creates different thought patterns and just, makes a difference. But and so obviously thank you everybody who watched this. But I just want everyone to think about, since the events of yesterday and the world's just in kind of a crazy place and so many things keep going on. Just ask yourselves every day if you are living a life of purpose and if you're satisfied with your level of involvement in life. And I don't care if it's an intactivist thing, I don't care if it's a personal hobby, but I think it's really worth it to look at all the areas in our lives. Like, are we being effective? Are we being effective with our kids? Are we being effective with our relationships? Are we being effective with ourselves? Are we making goals and actually committing to them and sticking to them? Because goals that you don't stick to are not effective. Parenting strategies with your kids that you don't follow through with are not effective. Just riling up your audience and getting people emotional and excited, but then not having a plan of action for them to follow is not effective. So, what in our lives are we doing that's not very effective that we could maybe do better and differently so that we can be sure we're not just like expending our energy and our resources where they could maybe be better spent? So, I think that's probably what CLR would appreciate, seeing all of us do more. And I know that's very, very true for me. I am a work in progress and I'm always trying to find better ways of doing things. So, the struggle is real, you guys, and you're not alone. So, keep it up, keep being wonderful. And Potts, thank you so much for letting me come on again. It was a delight. I always enjoy it. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day and weekend.
Awesome. It was great to have Melina back on as a returning guest with her final part 3 interview. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'm going to put all of Melina's links down in the description so you can follow and support her if you want. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our other intactivist content and interviews we release every single week. Please share and like this video to get this out to more people. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Bye.
Prevail over the system. We rise through precision. Uplift transition.